Land and farms has been shrinking in the United States since 1950. Ceding acres to reforestation, conservation, alternative energy, and urban development. Concurrently, societal demands for increasing surpluses of food, fuel, and fiber have been steadily increasing. Modern societies are built on agricultural abundance. There are nearly 2.3 billion acres of land in the United States. What exactly are we doing with it? When European settlers first arrived in the late 16th and early 17th centuries, forests covered over 40% of the New World landscape, whereas grasslands accounted for more than half of the American real estate. Initially, farmland expanded at the expense of forests, grasslands, and inevitably environmental quality. In 1950, farmland occupied fully half of the land area of the United States, nearly 1.2 billion acres, but has since decreased by nearly 25%. Cropland has similarly decreased by 17%, though production has increased nearly threefold during this time. Once production surpassed demand, around 1950, the agricultural footprint shrank at the behest of reforestation, conservation, alternative energy, and urban development. As the American economy transitioned from agrarian to industrial. According to the American Farmland Trust, we are now losing 2,000 acres of farmland per day, primarily to urban and residential land use. In contrast, urban land use has been steadily increasing since the middle of the 19th century and currently occupies over 100 million acres, equating to an increase of over 1,500 acres per day since 1850. In 1984, there were less than 200 wind turbines in the U.S., covering approximately 500 acres. In 2024, there are nearly 75,000, covering 7.5 million acres. Similarly, only 75 large-scale utility solar energy projects were active in 2010, whereas today there are over 4,000. Increasing from 2,100 acres in 2010 to over 400,000 acres in 2024. Essentially, this equates to an annual increase of nearly 500 acres per day of wind turbines and 100 acres per day for solar, much of which is at the expense of prime agricultural land.
Well, in the Midwest, for sure, I mean, all you have to do is drive into one of the larger metropolitan areas, whether it's Chicago or St. Louis or even Kansas City. And it's a common term these days, but we see urban sprawl. Instead of, cities staying compact and building upwards, the trajectory has been to develop further and further out. What you're doing with urban sprawl is you're converting land use from one type to another. And more often than not, in the Midwest especially, that land use is agriculture. So you're taking, in many cases, prime agricultural farmland and converting it to urban and suburban uses and development.
I'm from Bucyrus, Kansas, just 30 minutes south of Kansas City. I am a part of the Getterman Brothers family farms. I farm alongside my grandparents, my dad, 2 uncles, myself, and my 2 brothers. I've been home on the farm since 2017, just being 30 minutes from downtown Kansas City and about 10 to 15 minutes from anywhere you want to go. We're obviously seeing a lot of urban sprawl.
I'm a corn grower. I'm from Orlando, Tennessee. We raise row crops in south central Kentucky and northern middle Tennessee. I am a member of both the Kentucky and Tennessee Corn Growers Associations. I'm the 7th generation farmer. My family came to Simpson County, Kentucky in 1806. And my family's been farming here in this area ever since 1806. I have 2 sons. If one of them or both of them were to decide they wanted to farm for a profession, they would make the 8th continuous generation on the original home place farm in Simpson County. We're about 45 miles north of downtown Nashville where we're standing. Change is absolutely occurring in land use in our area. We do have development pressure, heavy industrial, light industrial, and we also have solar projects in the region that are coming in and taking up acres. There has been an extreme amount of development pressure that has really ramped up since COVID. Since then, we've seen just a crazy amount of people move into the Nashville area.
4th generation farmer, grow corn, soybeans, alfalfa, raise beef cattle. My full-time hat is with Illinois Corn. I serve as the Director of Conservation and Nutrient Stewardship, so doing a lot with water quality, nutrient loss, both policy and program work. Our farm is in kind of a unique area. We are 7 miles straight east of a fairly substantial airport, the Quad City International Airport. Thinking about land use and things that have happened going back to the 50s and things that my dad remembers, I think for us, the biggest one, the first real shift was the interstate coming through. And I live on a dead-end road, the family farm's there, and we still have the road closed signs at the end of what used to be a through road that the interstate came and cut through. So we've experienced that for a long time. Now I look out my south-facing windows and skies and it's red flashing lights at night. There's been a lot of wind development projects that have happened over, probably the last 12 years. We haven't personally had to have that on our property, but I think about we do have cell towers and billboards, and I think about when they were, quote, selling them to us at that time, it was, well, you can have it or not, but you're going to look at it either way. It's, do you want the payment or not? And I think about how that's now the same, a lot of the conversations when you're talking wind and solar that are taking substantial production footprints out of that space.
Lowell Neitzel will farm in Douglas County, Kansas, just outside of Lawrence. 4th generation farm with my wife's family. This place is awesome. It's near and dear to my heart. We've seen the loss of agriculture for sure from urban sprawl and industrial development. We have solar panels or solar farm trying to come into Douglas County within 150 feet of my backyard.
At the dawn of the 18th century, over 80% of the U.S. labor force was in agriculture, dropping to 50% in 1900. Now, there is only one farmer producing food, fiber, and fuel for every 150 Americans. The cost of land is rising higher than the grocery bill. Average land transaction prices for prime agricultural land often range from $20,000 to $30,000 per acre, putting it out of reach for most young, aspiring, and underserved farmers. Moreover, the average rate for cropland cash rent in the U.S. is less than $200 per acre, whereas solar companies are offering lease agreements in the thousands of dollars per acre. Land value inflation creates a significant barrier to entry for aspiring, young, as well as minority farmers.
What kind of makes me nervous is, a lot of this farmland that's selling across the Midwest it's not going back to the family farm. It's going to like big investment groups, absentee landowners from out of state, or just a wide array of different ownerships. It's going to be a lot of challenges ahead of us.
Farmer has a tract of land and maybe they don't have anybody in their farm that's wanting to take it to the next generation and continue farming. They have to decide how to unwind their business for retirement. They have to think about, what's going to happen with my land, what's going to happen to me financially. So these solar companies come out and they dangle a large carrot of a lot of money per acre in rent. It makes it harder to buy land because it drives up, it inflates the price of farmland. It inflates land rents for where we rent land to grow crops on. But solar is not the only pressure we have. Along those same lines as people retire, selling the land for development, to build subdivisions. Sadly, a lot of what we have going on here locally in this community, we have a lot of 5 and 10 acre lots being sold.
When you get offered a long-term, substantial economic potential viability option with a big solar wind project, it's really hard to not think about that. So if you think about that, maybe an average cash rent, high cash rent, say you get $500 or $600 an acre. If you have a renewable energy contract that's willing to pay you thousands of dollars per acre, a farmer could easily say, okay, I'll sell you this block of land over here, and then become even more competitive and create artificial inflation in a small geography and making it very hard for the next generation to compete with that, or local sellers or interested parties for that. And so it extrapolates a problem that already exists. And that's something, I think the access to land and capital is something, being a millennial farmer, that younger generation trying to access more acres is getting harder and harder to do. And those projects definitely play into what's available and even specifically the cost of what's available. The other part is not just the individual farmer implication of these projects, but that whole rural community. So if you don't have this acre in production anymore, you don't need seed for it. You don't need fertilizer for it. You don't need equipment for it. And so then what does that mean for that community? It's less jobs, it's less people. And so it really starts breaking down quickly on, really the viability of these rural communities when you lose the farming and agriculture sector.
We have city people that are coming into our area buying farm ground for astronomical amounts of money just for an investment and to get rid of some tax implications. But we can't physically go out and spend that kind of money without it making money. We have to have a return on our investment almost immediately to make it work.
So what that has challenged myself as a young farmer is me being able to purchase land or to rent land to make an income off of. The land prices have definitely inflated in this area, and they have doubled probably in the last 4 years. You can't even afford to purchase it or be able to make a living off of what the land costs per acre for what the land is able to produce. So that's the biggest challenging for me as a young farmer. I'm going to have to really put my nose on the grindstone and figure out how I'm going to be able to sustain not just myself, but my brothers that want to come home and be on the farm and be able to be profitable, be a profitable operation, either going down the road if we want to be in this community or somewhere else.
Trying to recognize unintended consequences first and foremost is important. So when you think about urban sprawl, one of the unintended consequences is as homes get built, as businesses and industry takes over surrounding land around agriculture, it drives up property rates, property taxes. So the incentive to sell, the disincentive to farm because of the cost, the heavy cost of property taxes, ultimately makes longtime farmers say, I can't afford to farm this piece of ground anymore. It's easier to sell out to developers than it is to continue to farm.
Modern agriculture, technology, mechanization, fertilizers, and pesticides have collectively manifest an abundance of food and also made possible the rewilding of previously cultivated land while simultaneously addressing global hunger. However, at what point does this shrinking land challenge reach an impasse?
An individual property owner should be able to do what they want. However, we need to think about what is the impact and how are these things incentivized and who's overseeing them. And every state's so different. So Illinois recently, within the last probably 18 months, 2 years, had a change, and it's no longer at the county level to make a lot of these decisions. It's been moved to the state. So it's Springfield, Illinois, deciding if some of these projects should be approved or not. And you lose a lot of that local insight and control, which is a problem and scary. It's probably a lot easier for a lot of these projects to go on flat black dirt that probably has access to some of these transmission lines and grid setup already. But does that make sense? Does it make more sense to find a way to incentivize and prioritize those marginal acres that maybe were former strip mine ground? Were they no longer in your row crop production acres? Are there ways that we can find a way to have a winning situation for both parties?
Well, the state of Tennessee, I think, has ascended to the number 2 spot in the nation for loss of farmland. And we're losing right at 7 acres an hour in the state of Tennessee. So like I said, land's a finite resource. Most people don't understand where their food comes from, where their fiber comes from, where their biofuels come from. So that's a real problem that we have, educating the public about the importance of farmland and the importance of sustainability of the way we do things, our economic sustainability, ensuring that farmers can stay on the farm. We have to have an economically viable business to tend the land. If we can't make a living, we can't farm. Agriculture is economic development. It's still the number 1 economic driver in our state and in our county. And people riding down the road don't realize that. They ride by a factory in town, or they ride by, something being built, a distribution center, and I think, man, that's really adding to the economy. And they drive by my farm and see me on a tractor, and I'm just in their way. They don't understand the economic driver that agriculture and forestry really is for our state.
Why are we not looking at, say, maybe more marginal grounds or other, say, places where we've already put impervious surfaces on the landscape as a better option for some of this stuff? Why are we taking the most productive farmland out of production?
Residential areas of the city of Chicago alone add up to the equivalent of 21 mega solar projects, which could route solar installations away from prime farmland. Vacant residential, commercial, and industrial areas add up to the equivalent of 16 mega solar projects.
And from an efficiency standpoint, that doesn't make sense, right? It's the most productive ground. So it's where we get the most bang for our buck per unit of input. And so wouldn't we think that we would want to preserve that for production of our food, as opposed to, take that out and create some sort of, solar installation that is likely to irrevocably change, that soil in terms of the production and what sort of materials are now in the soil and how has that impacted what can be grown there?
I think it's a difficult question. It's a difficult problem to deal with because it is competition for resources, right? And I think we need to find unique policy solutions to address the shrinking land challenge. But I also think the public needs to be aware that just like mining for minerals or solar farms, how and where we produce our food is a finite resource, and we need to protect that.
Is this sustainable? And should we, as a society, be concerned? Once it's paved over with asphalt or built over with concrete, you do not get that land back.